Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. You are participating in an info session for the full-time program of the BYU Marriott MBA. So I'm very excited to have Christie Clark, Preston Darger, Austin Strong, Julie Johnson, and David Lake, who are all alumni of the BYU MBA, who have agreed to join us today for a panel discussion, answer a few questions, and talk to you about their experiences in the BYU MBA. I've asked today Christie Clark to be our moderator, so I'm going to hand time over to her. Christie, thank you, and take it away.
Thanks, Sean. We'll start with some introductions and go around and then kind of lead into some of the questions that Sean and his team have already prepared. So I'll kick it off. Hi, I'm Christie Clark. I graduated from the BYU MBA program back in 2016. I've been at Frito-Lay, which is owned by PepsiCo, headquartered out of Dallas, Texas, ever since graduating. So coming up on 8 years this summer. And I double dipped. I did BYU for my BYU Provo for my undergrad as well. And I was a double major with communications, emphasis in advertising, as well as theater, acting. So yeah, that was a little bit about me. I'm going to pass it over to Austin.
Hey everyone, my name's Austin Strong. I am a BYU MBA class of 2018. Similar to Chrissy, I'm also a BYU double dipper. So I did my undergraduate in engineering. So I was a manufacturing engineering undergrad, worked for a few years as a manufacturing engineer in the medical device space, and then actually came back to BYU to take advantage of the joint MS MBA program that they had. So the Masters of Engineering plus the MBA, and then used the MBA to transition to management consulting. So I worked out of Boston for about 3 years in Deloitte, their strategy and operations consulting group. And then now I am the senior director of strategy at Weave, which is a publicly traded tech company based here in Utah.
Okay, I think we're going in order of graduation. And I think, Austin, you were the same class as David and Julie. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
David, do you want to take it away?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
Austin and I got to know each other very well in that class. And Julie as well. So I also finished in 2018. I was a finance track individual. In my undergrad, I studied communications with an emphasis in public relations. And at post MBA, I went to Amazon for a few years and worked in supply chain optimization tech as a product management technical person. And now I'm the senior director of product at Pattern over all of our supply chain and logistics sort of tech.
Great. I also love the shirt, David. Really, representing. I'm Julie Johnson, and I am also with the class of 2018. I did my undergrad at BYU in American Studies, and then went on to go to culinary school at Le Cordon Bleu, actually. Then after working for a few years, came back to BYU for the MBA, and I have been with Adobe ever since graduation, actually. I have worked in product during my time at Adobe, starting in product management, and about a year ago made the move to product marketing. So that's what I'm doing now.
Good to see all of you. Preston Darger, class of 2020. Like the theme here, I did a BYU undergrad in advertising, and then went to New York and worked in advertising and marketing in the sports and entertainment space for a few years before coming back to the Marriott School to do my MBA, where I focused in on marketing and strategy. For the past 3 or 4 years now, I've been at Delta Airlines based in Atlanta, Georgia, where I work in a commercial strategy role, which is kind of an internal consultant working on strategic projects across our enterprise, and love it here so far, and look forward to talking a little bit about the MBA program with you all today.
first question we have is around how and why you chose to get your BYU MBA. I'll kick us off. So I realized I didn't mention this. I worked in advertising at an agency for a few years in between undergrad and deciding to go back to grad school, similar to Preston. And I realized, at least for me, working in advertising, you do a lot of consulting, a lot of recommendations, but ultimately you're not the one leading strategy or making the final decision. And I realized I wanted to be on the other side of that table, the other side of the conference room table. And to get into brand management, which I'm doing now, I realized that I really needed more of a stronger business background. And traditionally, it's a type of role that required an MBA. So I was looking at different business schools, and actually BYU was not my first choice. I thought I wanted, because it was my undergrad. And so I figured I want to get a different school. I want more experience. And I was married at the time and needed to stay in Utah. I had been working in Utah. And so between the different options, I decided BYU was the best option within Utah. And it was the best decision I could have made. I didn't think I was qualified enough. I didn't think I had enough work experience. I had a little over almost 3 years at that point, but I thought you needed at least 4 or 5. And I prepared pretty quickly for the GMAT and just felt like, well, I'll give it a shot and then I'll try again harder next year. And it ended up being the right call at the right time. And I haven't looked back since, and it's really been the right decision for me, at least. And we can get into more details about why, but that's how I pivoted into an MBA.
I'll jump in really quick just to add my +1 to that. Coming from the advertising world, I didn't have much business acumen coming into the MBA program. Going to work in an agency, I loved my BYU undergrad, but and the advertising program is incredible. But I didn't. Going into the agency, I felt like I didn't really understand the full picture of some of these campaigns that we were launching, or maybe the metrics that they were measuring, or the financial implications. And it's not fun to go into those feeling unprepared. And so I always felt like the MBA was going to round out my skill set. And for me, that was a no-brainer. Beyond being kind of the professional catalyst to get roles I wouldn't be qualified for. For me, the education behind it and really learning skills and tools that I didn't have access to outside of the Marriott School of Business as an undergrad were key, and have been extremely valuable in my future career, now what I'm doing with Delta Airlines. So Christie outlined that really well.
Yeah, Chrissy, I can jump in with my experience. So I mentioned it earlier. So I was an engineering undergrad, and if you told me that in high school, like I never would have believed you. I never planned on doing engineering in my life. My math tutors would tell you that was not my strong suit. But I remember talking to a lot of mentors. My grandpa in particular was very influential and said, "Hey," I said, "I know I want to go into business." And he said, "Great, you should do a technical undergrad so you can at least speak to technical people and companies before, you actually go to try to run a business." So I did that for a few years. I worked as an engineer for a few years, but like I always knew I wanted to end up on the business side of things. And so an MBA was always on my roadmap. If you're considering an MBA, I think like one of the biggest advantages of the degree is it's perfect for people like me who are in one type of industry but want to transition out of that industry into like a more business realm, whether that's marketing or finance or operations or strategy or whatever. And so I was looking at a bunch of different schools, and had gotten accepted in like into some what you would consider like higher profile elite schools at the time, like just based on the rankings. But I just had this feeling, honestly, that I should go check out BYU. It was the best school in Utah. I'd heard so much about the ROI. And so I came up to an info session at the Marriott School. And I remember walking into the room and just seeing all the people who would become my class, like would potentially become my classmates. And it's honestly hard to describe. I just had this feeling hit me that these are the kind of people that I want to go into business with. And I actually canceled all my other applications. I only decided to like put all my eggs in the BYU basket. Thankfully, they let me in. And I think one of the biggest things I learned about doing the MBA here is not only did it allow me to change like career trajectories, but something I'll say is unique about BYU compared to all the other MBA programs. And I can say this having worked with MBAs from literally almost every name brand school you can work with, is BYU is an excellent opportunity for a big fish, small pond advantage. Like the class sizes here are smaller. Like a lot of other schools have like 700, 800, 900 students. And your opportunities to do things like take leadership and extracurriculars, to get like individual time with professors, to stand out and like create your own kind of like course of study are really, really limited in those small fish, big pond scenarios. And BYU is the complete inverse of that, where I had the opportunity to do things like run like a student management consulting club, to start an internal consulting group with David actually on this call, to like get like crazy, classes that I don't think they would normally allow me to do. And I had just this incredible experience as a result of that. And so I think when I like looking back on it, I didn't recognize now that the big fish, small pond advantage would be such a huge deal in coming to BYU, and it's made me enormously grateful that I came here for my MBA instead of going into some of the other schools I was looking at.
So yeah, my kind of in between undergrad and MBA, I started a marketing and PR firm out of my undergrad, and something that I noticed while I was doing that is a lot of traditional marketing and PR metrics are what I would call vanity metrics, which means it shows that you're doing a lot of like big things, engagements, clicks, likes, followers, all of this type of stuff. But I could not do a single thing to tell you whether or not the work that we were doing was actually benefiting the companies that we were working for. I couldn't draw a line between those metrics and ROI. And so I felt like if I was going to be successful in my career, that I needed to go and get more educated in order to do that. And so that's why I pivoted towards an MBA, and specifically in finance, because I wanted to understand economic drivers and not the accounting side, which I had to take those classes as well. You know, accounting's not the sexiest or most interesting thing in the world, but like finance just clicked with me because I was able to just like really understand what's actually driving value for the business and actually like connect dots. And it has helped me so much in my career, like post MBA, to understand a lot of those things. And so like that's why I wanted to get an MBA. But BYU specifically, like I'm going to be like a little bit honest here. Like I wasn't sure about BYU. I was pretty set on going to Duke, and then I went to the BYU Day in the Life, which was like the, hey, you can come and meet other people. And I had gone to one for Duke as well, and I was so impressed by everyone there. And it was like the environment I wanted to be in. And I walked in there, and we had a case study discussion, and I realized that that same caliber of person at Duke was at BYU as well. And I left feeling like I don't know that my mind was made yet, but I left feeling like this would be a great place to get an MBA. And then subsequently, I met my wife and we were engaged, and she was like, why in the world would you go pay like 80,000 in tuition at Duke and not take the scholarship you've been offered at BYU and hardly pay anything? Like, and the way she put it made it seem like a very easy decision. And we'll talk about outcomes later, but I have a really good example of like why that was worth it in the end, that I think will be interesting.
There were quite a few reasons why I chose BYU's program. I first started thinking about an MBA when I was working for a tech startup in Boston, and I had these two very influential mentors there who had gotten MBAs, and I was just in awe of their confidence and of the knowledge and the practical skills that they had gained throughout that experience. And so I think specifically BYU was a really good experience for me as an undergrad. I loved the environment of BYU, and in speaking and interviewing lots of graduates from BYU's MBA program, I saw in a lot of those folks the person that I wanted to become or the attributes that I wanted to gain. And so, to make a long story short, those were some of the influential reasons why I ended up choosing BYU.
Second question we have is around life balance, how you managed your time as a student along with any other responsibilities you had outside of classes or coursework, whether it was at home, with family, other personal endeavors. Julie, if you feel comfortable, would you be able to speak to your own experience?
Yeah, so I made a conscious decision at the beginning of the program, and I think it's actually a requirement, but to obviously not work the first year, and then also reduce my responsibilities in other areas intentionally so I could fully partake of the experience my first year. So, I did less with church callings, I did less with family activities. I think everyone on the call could agree that your first year is really demanding. But in the long stretch of a career, 1 to 2 years is really a pretty short price to pay for the acceleration that an MBA gives you. The women out there might be interested to know, like, did I have kids or not? I did not. I chose intentionally not to have kids until after I was finished with the program. Certainly that would have made the program a lot more challenging to have those responsibilities at home, but there were women in our program who did it, and I was in awe of them. So I know it's possible. And I think thinking about the program as a really unique opportunity to gain, I know we use the term network, but I like to use the term friends throughout the program, and really just digging into that experience that you have full time with them for 2 years, I found to be really valuable. So was my life balanced? No, it was pretty out of balance in terms of how much time I was spending on my studies, on school, on the activities that we had. But like I said, over the stretch of many years, I think it really evens out.
Preston, I saw you went off mute.
Yeah. No, just Julie's answer really resonated, and I think you laid that out really well. Something that comes to mind along with that, just as a point of context, I was married and had a 1-year-old during the program, and so kind of had these what one might see as competing priorities and how to manage that. And I think for me, it was just really coming into the MBA and into the BYU program with a plan, and with that plan prioritized. So for me, it really centered around I had ideas of what kind of jobs I wanted out of the program. And to me, that was priority one, is how can I work hard, and how can the BYU program help, which it did in spades, secure the type of postgraduate employment I was looking for. And the second priority was the education that I needed to support that, and then along with that was the relationship building that Julie talked on so wonderfully, that I think is organically built into the program. If you invest in it, it will invest back into you. And so for me, I really did kind of have this decision criteria around, well, is this going to help me find that next job? Is this club, or is this case competition, or whatever it might be, this extracurricular activity? And I tried to kind of go in very purposeful and intentional about how I made decisions around spending my time, making sure that obviously the things at home were most important, and to me that was. But I think the thing that I loved the most is that the BYU MBA really fostered and encouraged kind of that holistic view of yourself, where activities were all family friendly, and I was able to bring my wife and my children to certain engagements, and that was part of the experience, because I truly feel like you can be your best student when you can bring your whole self. And maybe that's a family, maybe that's a friend, maybe that's a roommate, maybe that's a hobby, whatever your whole self is. Bringing that to the program allows you to truly just get the most out of it. And BYU encouraged that and set up an environment where that was really possible. So I was grateful for that, for someone that was married and had a child at the time.
Christie, could I jump in and add something to what Preston just said?
Yeah.
He's the idea about having a focused plan, and I think the original question you asked is like, how do you manage doing all the student things on top of every other responsibility? And what I loved about what Preston said is that he had a plan coming in. One of the hardest things about the MBA program for, I think, me and most other students is everything looks interesting. Like you see the list of like the classes and all like the clubs you can join and all the different career tracks, and you're like, I want to do all of this. And there's an enormous sense of FOMO. And I've realized like that causes like students, MBA students in particular, to like really, really quickly spread themselves too thin. And I think like one piece of advice that was given to me, and I would give to anyone who's considering an MBA, is you come into the program with as narrow a scope as you possibly can of like what you want to do. And that doesn't mean like you have to say like I only have one job and that's the only job I'll take. But if instead of considering 10 different paths, if you can even narrow that down to like 2, and that way you can choose your classes, your clubs, how you're going to spend your time, the projects, like based on those 2 things, and just cut out all the other stuff, even though it's interesting. I think that's like an enormous benefit to students who come into the program, because otherwise it's really easy to burn yourself out. And the program is hard. Like I remember having a second year student pull me aside at the first couple weeks, and they said, "Hey, I just need to let you know that like you at some point in the first semester, you're gonna have a breakdown and you're probably gonna cry." And I was like, "No, that's like I'm not gonna do that. I'm a tough guy." And I 100% had a moment by the stairwell, and I think it was after like one of our core class finance exams where I like definitely like found a little corner and shed a few tears. And like it's a hard, it is going to push you. There will be some late nights. And so and the only other thing I would say in addition to like reduce the FOMO and cut down is you're going to be placed on a team. In the core curriculum, they place you on a team. David and I actually were on the same core team together. And I would just say like one of the biggest things I learned is lean heavily on your classmates and on your core team so that you can like divide and conquer assignments and projects and stay super organized. And like I wouldn't have made it through the first semester without David and like the other folks on our core team. And so just know like you don't have to do it by yourself, even though it is going to be hard.
You definitely wouldn't have won the strat sim without me, that's for sure.
We would not have won the strat sim without David.
Just kidding. I'll go ahead, Christie. So, I got married the first week of the MBA program. It was Labor Day weekend, and that was an interesting decision by me. But it definitely, talk about split priorities. It definitely made that a little bit difficult for me. So I think, in terms of managing being a student with my other responsibilities, one of the big things there was just I knew for me that I needed to learn. Preston mentioned that his first priority was getting a job, and second priority was education. I did not believe that I was good enough in my current state walking in to go get a great job. And for me, I needed to learn a lot more and fast in order to prepare myself for jobs. And so my balance was I need to be the best at these things that I think are important, which, finance was one of the most important things to me. The ops class, I just felt like was super important to me. Some of the other classes weren't my biggest priority, as Austin probably learned throughout that semester. And so I indexed on the things that I cared about, the things that I thought would make me better. And that doesn't mean that you need to index on the things that are your weaknesses. I think you index on the things that are going to make you into the person that can get the job that you want to get, or the jobs that you want to get. I will say some of you may be intimidated hearing from Austin and Preston about having this detailed plan coming in. I didn't know what product management was when I entered the MBA program. I didn't know what it was after 1 year in the MBA program. I didn't know what it was when I interviewed with Amazon to become a product manager, and I got the job, and it turned out it was the thing for me. It's perfect for my skill set. It's perfect for my life. I love it. I even I liked all the finance stuff, but even during the program, I was just never sure. And so if you know what you want, great. If you don't, there's still room to be a career switcher and figure things out. And BYU, relative to other MBA programs, BYU has a better education, unquestionably. Most of my other friends at top programs laugh at their curriculum, laugh at the stuff they're doing. It's basically people just go higher from those schools because they know that they get smart people there. BYU changes people into what they need to be successful in their career, and improves people. And to me, that is like a huge thing.
Austin, do you have anything to build on that?
I was just going to say amen to that. The two very quick things on David is from all the MBA alumni I meet with other schools, when I tell them the kind of things we did in our classes, they are always like, I cannot believe you got to have those kind of experiences or that level of rigor. And it is just an incredible experience. And honestly, it's because BYU, one of the things that's unique about it as a university is it is primarily a teaching university more than a research university. And so I had so many professors where I wanted to come and sit down with them for 30 minutes and go really deep into subject matter, they would always make time for that. And they push you in class, but in a really, they care about churning out people who are a lot more capable and intelligent than when they first entered in. And I love that about it. And the other just point I'll make quickly is on what David said is, even though I've talked about narrowing and Preston we talked about focus, like I didn't have everything completely figured out. And you are going to explore in the MBA program. And my only advice is just like, maybe don't explore 20 things, try to find like 5 that you can explore just to narrow the field a little bit, but you are definitely still going to explore, and BYU is an excellent environment for that.
Oh, thank you. Those are great builds. I feel like a lot of the things I would have mentioned have already been covered. I wanted to echo one thing Julie had said about even if I directly didn't go through some of the experience other people did, like I didn't have kids at the time. I was married, but I wasn't going through a wedding like David was his first week. But I guarantee you, I saw every single life stage of student in that program. You had people who were single, who were dating. You had people I saw a friend who went through a divorce in the program. I had a friend who got married in the program to someone else in the program. And you had people who had older kids, people who had babies over the course of the program. There really is room for every life stage that you're in. So if you feel like whatever life stage you're in precludes you from it, don't count yourself out. Don't give yourself the opportunity to try if you feel like it's the right step for you at this time. And then also one great thing about BYU is that it's a spiritually based university. And so we do recognize that when you are dedicating your time to something that you feel like will help you personally or help your family, that there is divine help as well. And that it's more than just you as you're putting in that time and putting in that dedication, that you'll get help beyond what you think that you might be capable of. So the next question, I feel like I know the answer from the panelists, but I'll ask it. Was it worth it? I'll start with David, just because you were first on my screen.
Sure. So I mentioned I had a good example of this. When I went to Amazon, like I said, I went into product management, and on my team at Amazon, there was a Duke MBA in the same like team, same role, same responsibilities as me, and we became very good friends. And it was very clear. No, 2 things. One is that at that different school, which I think at the time was the top 10 school, I got the same job as someone else who was really talented in their class. Number 2, he went $200,000 in debt over the course of his MBA. He paid close to like $100,000 in tuition, plus he had 4 kids, and so his life was insane. And I paid $1,000 in tuition my entire time. We didn't have full scholarships then; it was just like 3/4. But then I got another scholarship for being towards the top of the finance class. And so, like, I saw when you talk about like, was it worth it? I paid $1,000 to go from, direct. I didn't mention I did Teach for America for 2 years also before my MBA as part of my pivot plan. I went from, making $35,000 per year as a teacher to at Amazon, your total compensation package is somewhere around 180 to 200 to start. And so like I 5x'd or so my income, which meant my ROI, my payback period was less than 1 year, especially considering that I did an internship. And it was just like a complete no-brainer. My job is something that I'm happy in. Someone mentioned before that like a lot of pre-MBA jobs are not strategic, and you just kind of like end up doing things. Like most post-MBA jobs are very strategic roles where you are influential, where you are driving company in a direction and driving your area in a direction. And that's how I feel like where I've gotten to. And I love that. I love my job. Like, couldn't be more worth it for me.
Preston, anything to add on to that? Was it
No,
worth it?
David outlined it extremely well. It was worth it. I'm at my dream company. I love what I do. And I'm here because of the BYU MBA that helped get me here. So short and sweet, but David outlined it really, really well.
Julie, Austin, either of you?
Sure, yeah. I think I'd like to talk to some of the women who may be thinking about their career and how it impacts their impact on family and raising their kids. because I know that can be a different decision than our male colleagues sometimes. There are different things to consider. I think one of the distinct advantages of getting an MBA was that it gave me the type of credentials and the opportunity to have a high-paying role and do it in the way that I wanted. So right now I have a young child. I have a 2-year-old, and I'm expecting another baby in May. And I work 3/4 time. So I work about 26 to 30 hours a week. A lot of that I'm working from home. I don't have to travel a ton, and I'm still progressing in my career. So that is the balance that I want right now. While my children are young and at home, I want to be able to spend a little more time with them. And my husband and I have chosen that type of balance so that our life doesn't feel like a slog. We both get to progress in our careers, um, and life feels balanced most of the time. Without some type of professional degree like an MBA, that is much harder to come by. It's much harder to be able to define the type of work that you do and the type of hours that you want to work. So that is one distinct advantage I see for women who are interested in pursuing an MBA. For me at this season of my life, I am not pursuing something in management consulting. I am not pursuing something that is 60 hours a week. It's not the type of life that I want. Will I work more once my kids are older? Maybe, but I also kind of like having, an extra 10 to 15 hours a week. So I think it's a great way to give yourself the ability to design the type of life that you want.
Austin, did you have anything on top of that?
No, I think everyone honestly said it, like outlined everything perfectly. And all I would just add in very, very short is just what Julie said is really important is that the BYU MBA, because it's so low cost compared to the ROI you get, it gives you a ton of flexibility in just in like designing the lifestyle you want afterwards. So I was the opposite. I did do management consulting. And I don't have nearly the same amount of like considerations that Julie or other women on this panel have to think about. But I was able to choose to leave consulting earlier than any of my colleagues because I didn't have to pay back some enormous school loan. And that allowed me to go join any company that I wanted, whether that was a startup, whether that was, moving into a larger organization, whether it was doing an entrepreneurial thing. I had that option available to me because of the ROI that BYU provided. And that is something that all of my friends who went to Ivy League schools or other, schools that were great schools, but very expensive, did not have. And so if you're looking for flexibility, I think this is honestly the single greatest MBA option on the market for that.
I wanted to answer the question too about is it worth it, and also pivot to the next question, which is around advice to someone considering a BYU MBA. Because for me, I'd echo what all the other panelists have said. It was absolutely worth it, especially considering that it wasn't something that was my top choice when I was looking at different management programs. But a BYU MBA and getting an MBA has given me the flexibility that I need as I've been when I had a child, and balancing that with furthering my career. I'm in a position where I do have more say around my schedule and more of that in leadership roles where I can better define when I work and how I work than I did prior to that out of just an undergrad role. Advice I'd give is it's something that Sean actually mentioned at the top of the call about the network of alumni. And I can absolutely echo that the ROI just out of the network of alumni that this program opens up was absolutely worth it as well. I can directly track the role that I have right now to the alumni network. I did a cold call through LinkedIn to someone who had BYU on their resume, who I had never met, but who worked at Frito-Lay, and I knew I wanted to try and get into Frito-Lay. And he offered to do an info session with me and got me in through the full-time recruiting cycle, even though I hadn't done an internship there. And it was through that alumni network that really expands beyond just Utah, just the Mountain West. BYU has a national network and international too in some regards, more than I've seen from many schools, if you look at any state schools, or if you look at a lot of like what you'd consider a top tier school, they're often siloed within specific markets or specific areas, geographic regions, or specific industries. And BYU, at least in my own experience, has breadth beyond this is a school for CPG marketing, or this is a school for tech. Like it extends beyond just Utah. It extends beyond certain industries or specific specialties. I mean, there are definitely ones that are easier to be recruiting out of for BYU, but it was not a limiting factor in my own experience. So my advice would be, as you're weighing different options, look at, if you know where you want to go, look at where you want to go. And I would challenge you to see if you can search through LinkedIn, if there's a BYU grad there, because I can almost guarantee that at every company, if not a BYU MBA, at least a BYU undergrad. And the connection honestly extends beyond just the MBA program. When you have that school on your resume, it's definitely stronger through the MBA, but undergrad as well. You just build those really strong connections that as you're seeking as an MBA student, help reinforce it. And it really is an alumni network that gives back. So that was some advice that I give as you guys are weighing different options. Throwing it back to Preston, any other advice that you'd give?
Yeah, some of the advice that I would give, and this is advice I did not take and wish I would have. If you are still in the consideration of an MBA in general, I would start preparing for one either way. You know, admissions tests and preparation like that have long lead times, and so there's nothing prohibited from taking, you know, the GMAT or any admissions tests now. And preparing to have those conversations or those informational sessions now. Things like this, joining this info call, obviously go a long way. And then when it comes to kind of starting the MBA with momentum, you know, if this is something that you do decide to pursue, I think you hit the ground running, and you hit the ground running really hard right there in August and September when you start the program. But there's nothing to say that you can't start that preparation now around, to Austin's point, beginning to think through what you want on the other side of the program and what it's going to take between now and there to get there, and having those conversations and building those relationships. You don't need to dive into the schoolwork yet, but if there are relationships that you can start to build with current BYU MBAs or future classmates or former BYU MBA alumni, that will only help you hit the ground running in August and September when you start a program, because you do start running hard with recruiting, with classes, with the core work that David and Austin and Julie mentioned earlier. There's a lot to do right when you begin. And so creating momentum and getting a head start is something that I think really sets a lot of BYU students apart. I was assigned a mentor 4 months before I ever stepped foot on campus. And that mentor really helped establish my kind of strategy and goals going in. And I'm sure that that's a program that still exists in some way or form. And investing in that before I ever made it to Provo was a huge step forward for me. So for me, it's all about preparation and starting now. There's no drawback to investing early when you're thinking about the program.
Austin, any advice you'd give?
Yeah, I'll have two. So one is just, if you're considering an MBA, this is going to sound so like marketing cliche and cheesy, and I really don't mean it this way, but really just have confidence in yourself that you can actually do this. So like I said, I was an engineer before this, and I remember sitting down in like the first week, and people in class are throwing around terms like EBITDA and NRR and networking, and I just had like no idea what any of that meant. And I don't know if you know this, but they don't teach those things in the engineering college. And so I remember I literally had to grab a second year student and somewhat embarrassingly asked, like, can you explain to me what networking is? Because everyone's talking about it. It's apparently something I'm supposed to do, but I have no idea like what that actually entails or how to go about doing it. And I felt very, very intimidated by my classmates. I didn't have as much experience as they did. I certainly didn't have like the business acumen that many of them did. Um, and they're like a really impressive group of individuals. And I felt like this enormous sense of imposter syndrome that the MBA, office is going to call me up and be like, hey, we realized we actually let you in by mistake. Thank you for coming to Provo. We'll like reimburse you your tuition, but like we need you to leave. And obviously that never happened. And I ended up like just really thriving in the program. But it took me a couple months to gain my confidence. And I would just say like, look, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like you will get in there and feel like you don't belong. And I promise you like that you do. And so don't psych yourself out and think that you can't do this. Um, if I can give what's a completely separate piece of advice that I wish I had like to anyone considering this is please, please, please take advantage of the opportunity to chart your own path in the MBA program. The school is going to provide you with some good resources. Like they will have career services. They'll have tracks. But to be honest, though, and I'm going to give a controversial opinion here, those are just tools that you can use if you want to. They are not requirements. And so if you like come into the MBA program and like the school is great at providing like a streamlined, pipeline into places like Amazon or Dell or Adobe. And those are awesome, awesome career paths. But there may be people like me who didn't want to go work for a Fortune 500 company. Like I wanted to do consulting. And at the time, there were no real paths into consulting for the MBA program. There wasn't a strategy track. There wasn't a like, recruiters that were coming to campus, except for like maybe one or two firms. And so I had to like basically not worry about the track, go and like do my own recruiting, and career services and the tracks were not helpful to me. And that was completely okay. And so I think like if you come into the program, just know that like if you don't fit into the box that you're like, I don't know what track I belong into, or I'm looking at all the schools, the companies that come on campus, and like I don't know if any of these are really where I want to end up. Just know that those are options the school is providing for you, but that is not limiting what you can do. And so you can absolutely go just like hustle and network your way into whatever kind of lifestyle or job or exit opportunity you want to. Don't let them put you into a box. Um, and just recognize that like your incentives may not be completely aligned with career services. They're wonderful people and they're there to help a lot of the students, but their job is to place as many people as quickly as possible in the most efficient manner as possible. And that may not be the kinds of companies that you want to end up with, and that is completely okay to do.
Oh, thanks, Austin. Julie, did you have any advice to share?
Sure, yeah. It's so interesting to hear experiences like Austin's because I came into the program with such great respect for Austin as one of the people who like really nailed it. That it's interesting to hear that even people like Austin suffer from imposter syndrome. So let that be a lesson to everyone. If you're feeling that way, it's probably fake. Yeah, I think I'll just speak again about this word networking. So I, was somewhat intimidated by that coming in to the program as well. And I think it's because I didn't really understand it. I thought to myself, what can all these other folks I'm going to school with do for me? Because that's what we often think about with networking is that you're going to get something out of it. And I did not realize the value of that network until even just a few years ago, because you're all coming into the program, you have the same amount of experience, and you don't have a lot of seniority within an organization or credibility. But I start to actually see the strength of my network growing exponentially at this point. Like, if I were interested in a position where Austin or David work, I would hope that I could get a short list. I could be shortlisted for an interview at that organization with them because of the experiences that we went through together and the caliber of the type of work and person that I know that I hope that they know I am, because it would be exactly the same if they ever came to me and said, hey, Julie, there's like this position at Adobe that I'm really interested in. Can you help me get in? In a second, I would hire both of them, or I would do everything I could to help them get hired at Adobe. So it's amazing that now I have this network of 100 or so friends that I could go, and even though I haven't even seen David or Austin in years, I at the drop of a hat, I would help them. I will also say that it's also really inspiring to see what your friends are up to. So, every few years we'll have, an MBA get together, and I get to see these folks who I haven't talked with, our paths haven't crossed for a while. And I love hearing about all the amazing things everyone is doing. you know, so-and-so has started this company, so-and-so is doing this here. It is such a cool group of creative individuals who are doing such cool things with their lives, even outside of their careers, that I love being associated with that group of people. So that has been a huge perk for me, you know, as the years have gone on, even, you know, 5 years out of the MBA program.
That's great, Julie. David, any last advice?
Sure. 3 quick notes. Number 1 is if you're intimidated by the GMAT, and I can say this as a former math teacher, the GMAT is literally Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry from the math side. It disguises itself as other things, but it's literally things that everyone can do. And the trick is doing it fast, right? And most of it's tricks, most of it can be learned, most of it can be practiced. You can get a good score if you graduated high school and you're willing to put in some time, effort. So you can do it, number 1, on the GMAT side. Number 2, I want to highlight that you can make the MBA program what you want to be. Austin covered some of those things, but I think there's one at one point, Austin and myself and another woman in the program were all sitting together for lunch, and we were halfway complaining about things. We're like, the MBA program is great, but it could be so much better if these few things were different. And we sat there, and then the other woman, her name was Suze, and Suze goes, why don't we just do it? And she scheduled time for us to meet with the director of the program and the assistant director, who was then Dan Snow. Now Dan, I think, is over the program. And we pitched our ideas of like what we thought should change. And Dan basically took us under his wing. He's like, why don't you guys start to do this stuff? And that's where that internal consulting program came from that Austin said that apparently several years straight later is still running strong. And so like we were able to change things fundamentally in the program, make things better, make it our own. And I think you can do the same thing if you feel like there's something missing, which I think it's pretty good like as it is, but you can make it even better. And the last thing is to look toward a career rather than a job. And I think there's a lot of focus on how much money are you going to make in your first job out there? What, like, I just got to get a job. I just got to focus on the career that's going to be best for you as you search for this. Focus on the thing that's going to be sustainable. Look into salaries, not just like, here's my my entry level post MBA salary, but look at like the career that I want to do. Like, what does it make 3 years down the road? What do people with 5 years of experience at this company make? As you're trying to think through these things, like sometimes a lot of money up front looks like the right thing to do. And it might be for some of you. Sometimes it's not. Some of you, like Austin, sacrificed a couple of years of his life in consulting, living a miserable, terrible life. No, I'm just kidding. But some people feel that way. But it's worth it because Austin got into the career that he wanted to through that. And so like he was planning a career. I planned a career through Amazon. Julie's obviously got her like perfect career for her life. Preston says it's his dream job. Like I think that's a common thing. Obviously, Christie's been there for forever. So that must be a strong career for her. Like I think that's something that you should take from all of these people that I think all of us are like pretty successful. I think it's because we found the right career for us, not just the right job.
If Sean, if it's okay, if I have one final thought, just someone had mentioned this before, but don't preclude yourself from applying if you feel like you're not the traditional candidate, or if you feel like the GMAT is too hard, or just don't count yourself out now. Try, because if you feel like it's right, there's a reason why you have that feeling. So go for it and let us know how we can help.
That was powerful. Thank you guys so much for what you shared. I think everyone who participated in this has to agree. We had the right panel for what we needed to know today. We covered a lot of great topics and really heard some stories that were so individualized, so helpful and relatable for the tough decision that you might be making as you are looking at your future. And I really love, David, your summary there, that you're not just looking at a 2-year decision, right? This isn't where you're going to sink the next 2 years of your life. I think Preston, Austin, Julie, Christie, you guys all shared very poignantly that this is a life-changing decision that affects the next 20 years, the next 30 years. And it's BYU, I have to point out that this is something that goes with you into the eternities, that we want you to be successful. We want you to make your millions and support the people who depend on you. We want you to go forth after graduation and have a great career path, but we want you also to be able to engage with the communities, the organizations, your church, and your personal life, the things that are important to you as you go forth genuinely as a leader who is emulating Christ-like attributes and is able to make an impact in your community and to literally change the world. It sounds ambitious, but I see it happening every day inside of our program and with our graduates. You've heard here some great success stories that the MBA can take you where you're trying to go, and it can even help you decide where it is that you need to end up in all the difficulties that we face in life. So this isn't the end of anything. This is the start to the next conversation that we're happy to pick up. Thank you again for your time and have a great rest of your day.